Imagine the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean during World War II, a theater so immense that traditional naval tactics were no longer sufficient. The islands dotted across thousands of miles of water became strategic strongholds, supply points, and battlegrounds. In this environment, the U.S. Navy revolutionized naval warfare by deploying aircraft carriers and submarines in ways that had never been seen before. These floating airbases and stealthy underwater hunters allowed the Allies to project power across enormous distances, striking Japanese forces where they least expected it and disrupting supply lines that were critical to the enemy's war effort. Aircraft carriers transformed the concept of naval engagement. No longer were battles decided merely by the positioning of battleships or the exchange of cannon fire on the high seas. Instead, the carriers allowed pilots to take off from the middle of the ocean, delivering bombs, torpedoes, and fighter support to targets hundreds of miles away. Every mission was a delicate dance of timing, coordination, and sheer courage. Behind each successful strike were countless hours of planning, engineering, and human effort, from the pilots braving enemy fire to the deck crews racing against the clock to launch and recover planes. Meanwhile, submarines prowled the waters silently, often for weeks at a time, seeking enemy shipping lanes and vital convoys. Life aboard these vessels was claustrophobic, tense, and dangerous. Yet every mission carried the potential to change the course of the war. These silent hunters cut off supplies, gathered intelligence, and forced the Japanese Navy to spread its resources thinner, creating opportunities for Allied forces to strike elsewhere. The combination of carriers in the sky and submarines below created a new kind of naval chess game, one where strategy, patience, and adaptability determined victory or defeat. But the story of the Pacific is not just about machines and tactics, it is about the people who made these innovations possible. Sailors, pilots, and support personnel worked tirelessly under extreme conditions, knowing that their success could save lives and turn the tide of battle. Mail from home, small comforts, and well-organized logistics became as important as ammunition and fuel, sustaining morale and keeping the fighting spirit alive in the face of adversity. In this series, we will journey through the dramatic battles, daring missions, and remarkable human stories that defined the U.S. Navy's campaign in the Pacific, from the silent depths of submarines to the roaring decks of aircraft carriers. We will uncover how innovation, courage, and determination reshaped the face of warfare. If you enjoy history brought to life with vivid detail and compelling stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss any of our upcoming explorations into the pivotal moments of World War II. Stay with us as we dive into the incredible saga of the Pacific War, where every decision, every mission, and every act of bravery contributed to the Allied victory. As the vast Navy fleet sailed across the endless expanse of the Pacific, engaging in missions that stretched from one distant island to another, it became clear that victory would not be determined solely by firepower or maneuvering skill, but by the ability to sustain human life in the most hostile of environments. Every vessel, from the smallest supply ship to the mightiest aircraft carrier, had to function as a self-contained ecosystem capable of supporting its crew and, in many cases, the wounded who could not be left behind. Shipboard hospitals emerged as sanctuaries amid the chaos of war, equipped to handle injuries ranging from minor shrapnel wounds to the devastating effects of bomb blasts and naval skirmishes. These floating medical centers were staffed by dedicated doctors, nurses, and corpsmen whose tireless attention and innovative techniques often made the difference between life and death. Supplies were the lifeblood of these operations. The Navy's logistical network was a marvel of coordination and foresight, moving essential materials across thousands of miles of open water under constant threat of enemy attack. Every bullet, ration, bandage, and letter from home was carefully accounted for, packaged, and transported, ensuring that ships at the farthest reaches of the Pacific were never left wanting. The supply chains were not just conduits of material, they were the invisible threads that held the entire war effort together, connecting the men on the front lines to the industrial might of the United States and sustaining the momentum needed to maintain prolonged campaigns. A sailor recovering from a gunshot wound in a shipboard infirmary could be confident that his next meal, his pain medication, and even the small comforts of mail from family were moments away, provided by an intricate system of planning and dedication that often went unnoticed by those outside the Navy. The efficiency of these supply chains was put to the test in countless ways. Typhoons, enemy submarines, and long stretches of empty ocean meant that the slightest delay could have catastrophic consequences. Yet, the Navy learned to adapt, employing rendezvous points far from enemy sight, using clever camouflage, and coordinating schedules with precision so that each vessel received exactly what it needed, exactly when it was needed. Shipboard hospitals, meanwhile, were constantly prepared to handle the unexpected. Whether a sudden air raid left dozens wounded or a landing party returned from a contested beach with injuries that required immediate attention, the interplay between medical readiness and logistical efficiency created a feedback loop. Sailors and Marines could fight with greater confidence knowing that no matter what happened, they would be supported, treated, and supplied. Beyond the mechanics of medicine and transport, there was a human story woven into every delivery and every operation. Letters from home, arriving via the Navy's dedicated mail system, carried more than words, they carried hope, reassurance, and the emotional fuel necessary to face the long, grueling days of duty in isolated waters. A young pilot recovering from burns or a fractured limb could lift his spirits in an instant with news of a newborn in the family or a message from a loved one, expressing pride and encouragement. These small acts of care became as vital as the ammunition and fuel that powered the ships and planes, reminding every service member that they were not alone in their struggle, that their sacrifices were recognized and valued, and that their lives mattered beyond the theater of war. The coordination of medical and supply efforts required ingenuity, foresight, and unyielding commitment. Hospitals aboard carriers and cruisers were constantly updated to accommodate new challenges, from chemical burns to tropical diseases, while supply officers anticipated needs weeks in advance, factoring in everything from climate conditions to potential enemy interference. It was a system that demanded precision, but it also demanded humanity, understanding the limits of human endurance, the psychological toll of isolation and combat, and the critical importance of restoring strength and morale whenever possible. Each successful operation was a testament not just to technological innovation, but to the resilience, intelligence, and dedication of the people who made it all possible. As the Pacific campaign progressed, the link between logistical mastery and battlefield success became undeniable. Amphibious assaults that might have seemed impossible in the dense jungles of New Guinea or on the rocky beaches of remote islands were made feasible because the men had the supplies, medical support, and reinforcements they needed to press forward. Casualties were minimized not only through careful planning but through the rapid and efficient care provided on shipboard. Hospitals, allowing soldiers and sailors to return to duty or to recover with dignity, even when a shipment failed to reach its intended destination due to accident or enemy action. Contingency plans ensured that supplies could be rerouted, demonstrating the extraordinary flexibility and foresight embedded in the system. In essence, The success of the U.S. Navy in the Pacific cannot be measured solely by victories in battle or the sinking of enemy vessels, but by the sustained ability to keep its people alive, healthy, and prepared for the next challenge. The story of shipboard hospitals and supply chains is a story of courage expressed not only through combat, but through the meticulous, relentless work that made combat possible. It is the story of countless unsung heroes: the doctors, nurses, corpsmen, supply officers, and logistical planners whose contributions ensured that the fleet could operate at full strength, that every wounded sailor had a chance to survive, and that the human heart could endure amidst the vast, unforgiving theater of war. Through this lens, the Pacific War is not just a tale of ships and planes, of strategies and battles, but a testament to the power of preparation, care, and coordination, proving that even in the most technologically advanced and destructive conflicts, human life and ingenuity remain at the center of every victory. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly, a vast, unforgiving expanse that seemed to challenge every sailor and commander with its immensity, its unpredictability, and its capacity to isolate even the most well-equipped fleet. In this immense theater of war, the U.S. Navy faced logistical challenges that were unprecedented in the history of naval operations. It was not enough to simply build powerful ships and train brave sailors. The war demanded a constant, reliable flow of equipment, ammunition, food, medical supplies, and countless other essentials to keep every vessel, every crew, and every soldier functioning at the highest level. Every supply line was a lifeline, a thread connecting the industrial heart of the United States with ships that could be weeks, if not months, away from a secure port, operating in waters patrolled by enemy submarines and aircraft, where a single misstep could turn a routine delivery into disaster. The sheer scale of the operation was staggering. Convoys had to be meticulously organized, with ships departing from ports with precise timing to avoid detection, ensure mutual protection, and meet at designated rendezvous points across thousands of miles of ocean. Supply officers coordinated with engineers, navigators, and military planners to anticipate needs that often seemed impossible to predict, balancing the urgency of frontline demands with the limitations of transport capacity. Every crate of ammunition, every barrel of fuel, every ration pack was carefully counted, labeled, and loaded with an attention to detail that could mean the difference between victory and defeat. The Navy had to develop a system that was not only efficient but flexible, able to adapt to weather, enemy interference, and the sudden exigencies of combat. Shipboard hospitals, already remarkable for their capabilities, were a crucial part of this supply network. Medical personnel depended on the timely arrival of specialized equipment and pharmaceuticals, often sourced from distant ports, to treat injuries ranging from minor cuts to devastating battlefield trauma. Without reliable logistics, even the most skilled doctors and nurses could do little to save lives. In the same way, the maintenance of the fleet required a constant stream of spare parts, engines, and tools, delivered on time and ready for immediate use, allowing ships to remain cont-ready far from the safety of home ports. The Navy became a floating city, a network of interdependent vessels where each component, from the smallest supply ship to the largest carrier, was a crucial link in the chain. The human element of this logistical endeavor cannot be overstated. Sailors worked tirelessly, often under extreme conditions, to ensure that every shipment arrived intact. The loading and unloading of cargo could take place under the shadow of enemy fire, in sweltering tropical heat, or amidst the confusion of stormy seas. The men knew that a single mistake, a miscounted crate, a missed rendezvous, a misrouted shipment could leave a combat unit vulnerable, a hospital short of essential medicines, or a pilot without fuel for the next mission. Every operation demanded absolute precision, yet flexibility was equally critical, as the unpredictable nature of war frequently forced officers to improvise, reroute, or adjust their plans in real time. Beyond the mechanics of moving goods, logistics carried a profound psychological weight. Troops depended on the regular arrival of supplies, not just for sustenance but for reassurance that they were supported, that they were not forgotten, and that the enormous machinery of war had not left them isolated in the middle of the Pacific. Letters from home, carefully packed and transported across thousands of miles, brought hope and comfort to men who had been at sea or in the jungle for months. These small tokens of connection were delivered through the same network that brought ammunition, medical supplies, and fuel, underscoring the Navy's understanding that the war was fought as much in the hearts and minds of its personnel as on the battlefield itself. Every logistical mission was a story of courage, ingenuity, and coordination. Convoys moved in strict formation, often under the constant threat of enemy submarines, aircraft, or the sudden wrath of a Pacific storm. Radio communications, charts, and intelligence reports guided their movements, but human skill and judgment determined whether a shipment reached its destination intact. Supply officers became strategists, plotting courses that balanced speed, safety, and efficiency, while the crews who loaded, secured, and delivered the cargo worked with relentless determination, often in conditions that tested endurance, morale, and ingenuity. This logistical mastery enabled complex operations to succeed. Amphibious assaults, air raids, and prolonged patrols depended on a system that ensured men and machines were where they needed to be when they were needed most. The capture of strategic islands, the maintenance of air superiority, and the readiness of ground forces were all made possible because the Navy had created a chain that stretched across the Pacific, linking production lines, ports, and frontline units in an intricate, well-oiled network. Every victory in the field was mirrored by a victory in planning, coordination, and execution behind the scenes. Ultimately, the story of the Navy's logistical triumphs in the Pacific is a testament to foresight, resilience, and human ingenuity. It demonstrates that war is waged not only with weapons and strategy, but with meticulous preparation, unwavering commitment, and the quiet heroism of those who ensure that ships sail, planes fly, and soldiers have what they need to face the challenges ahead. The intricate network of supply, medical readiness, and careful planning was the invisible backbone of the Allied effort, a silent but indispensable force that allowed the United States Navy to project power across the most vast and dangerous theater of war in history, transforming potential chaos into coordinated, decisive action and turning the tides of battle in favor of those who understood that sustaining life and equipment was as crucial as winning it. Amid the relentless expanse of the Pacific, where the ocean seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction, and the horizon offered little more than sky and water, sailors and soldiers found themselves far from home, often for months at a time, facing the uncertainty of war and the constant threat of enemy attack. In such isolation, amidst the thunder of naval artillery, the roar of aircraft engines, and the deafening silence of a submarine patrol, it was not only ammunition, fuel, and medical supplies that sustained the fighting men. It was something far more personal, yet profoundly impactful: mail and letters from home. These simple pieces of correspondence became lifelines, small yet powerful reminders of a world beyond the Pacific, and their arrival could transform the mood and morale of an entire crew. For the men aboard carriers, battleships, and submarines, a letter from a loved one was more than words on paper. It was a tangible connection to the life they had temporarily left behind. Every envelope held stories of family events, friends' updates, and heartfelt encouragement, providing solace amid the chaos of battle. Sailors would read and reread letters during quiet moments, passing them along to crewmates so that the joy, humor, and comfort contained in those messages could ripple through the vessel. In cramped quarters and long, exhausting days, the anticipation of mail became a shared hope, a small beacon in the vast uncertainty of war, and its impact extended far beyond simple sentiment. It directly affected morale, cohesion, and the mental endurance necessary for long-term operations in remote and hostile environments. The logistics behind delivering these letters were themselves a remarkable feat. The Navy's supply chain, already tasked with transporting weapons, medical supplies, food, and fuel across thousands of miles, took great care to ensure that mail reached even the most distant outposts. Ships would rendezvous at precise locations to exchange parcels and letters, often under the threat of enemy detection or in the midst of inclement weather. Knowing that the delivery of a simple letter could uplift a sailor's spirit in ways no material supply ever could. For the men on patrol, a letter could be a source of comfort during the long, tense hours of a submarine mission, or a moment of distraction and laughter for a carrier crew waiting for the next wave of planes to launch. The knowledge that someone back home was thinking of them, that they were not forgotten, provided an emotional anchor that sustained them through danger, fatigue, and the monotony of endless ocean travel. Stories of the impact of mail abound throughout the Pacific campaign. A young pilot, freshly recovered from a minor injury sustained during a strike on a Japanese island, found renewed energy when he read a letter from his sister describing the arrival of a new puppy at home. Or a sailor in the engine room of a destroyer laughed aloud at a comical anecdote from his childhood friend, shared across hundreds of miles in ink and paper. These moments were fleeting, yet they were profound, offering a sense of normalcy and a connection to humanity that contrasted sharply with the uncertainty and violence of their environment. The arrival of letters was celebrated quietly, yet with heartfelt gratitude, and sometimes became a communal event aboard ships, as the crew gathered to hear aloud the stories and updates from distant family members. The importance of these letters went beyond boosting morale. They became a critical component of resilience and performance. Men who knew they were supported emotionally were more likely to endure hardship, take calculated risks, and remain committed to their duties despite fatigue, injury, or isolation. Mail reminded them that their sacrifices had meaning, that someone in another part of the world cared about their well-being, and that their connection to home, even if temporarily severed, remained intact. In many, these letters acted as silent reinforcements, fortifying the mental and emotional strength required to carry out complex operations. Whether launching planes from a carrier, navigating treacherous waters in a submarine, or landing troops on hostile shores. Beyond letters, small parcels containing food, toiletries, or mementos from home served as tangible symbols of care and attention. A chocolate bar, a fresh pair of socks, or a photograph could lift spirits just as powerfully as a motivational speech, reminding the men that they were valued and remembered. The Navy recognized this, dedicating resources and personnel to the meticulous handling and timely delivery of mail, understanding that in the vast and often impersonal expanse of the Pacific, emotional support was just as vital as physical supplies. Each successful delivery was a quiet victory, a reaffirmation of the Navy's commitment to the holistic well-being of its men, and a demonstration of the human element that underpinned every technological innovation and tactical maneuver in the theater. In the broader context of the Pacific Campaign, where ships and aircraft projected power over thousands of miles and battles were fought across isolated islands and treacherous coastlines, Mail served as a connective tissue linking the front lines to the home front. It reminded sailors and soldiers that their struggles were part of a larger effort, that their bravery and endurance mattered, and that despite the isolation, they remained part of a network of care, support, and shared purpose. In this way, letters and personal correspondence became instruments of morale as vital as any weapon or supply shipment. A reminder that in war, sustaining the human spirit was inseparable from sustaining the fight itself. Through this lens, we begin to see the Pacific Campaign not just as a series of battles, strategies, and technological achievements, but as a deeply human story, where the courage, resilience, and emotional sustenance of individuals were as crucial to victory as the power of fleets and the precision of planning. Mail and personal correspondence, in their simplicity, became threads of hope woven into the fabric of war, ensuring that no sailor or soldier felt truly alone, that every act of bravery was anchored by love and support from home, and that the spirit of those fighting far from their families remained unbroken, carrying them through the vast and perilous reaches of the Pacific. Beneath the sunlit waves of the Pacific, where the surface of the water shimmered deceptively calm, a hidden war unfolded that few on land could fully comprehend. Submarines, the silent predators of the sea, prowled enemy waters with a sense of purpose and danger that demanded both courage and ingenuity. Unlike the grand battles fought on carriers and battleships, where the roar of artillery and the thunder of bombs were visible to all, submarine operations relied on stealth, patience, and precision. Every mission was a gamble, an intricate dance of observation and calculation, where the line between success and disaster could be measured in inches and seconds. Yet despite these perils, the submarines of the U.S. Navy were manned entirely by volunteers, men who understood the extraordinary risks of life beneath the waves and chose to face them regardless, driven by a sense of duty, adventure, and commitment to the broader war effort. Life aboard a submarine was unlike any other experience in the military. The confined quarters, often no more than a series of narrow passageways and bunk spaces stacked on top of one another, demanded a level of discipline, cooperation, and endurance that tested the limits of human resilience. Sailors spent weeks submerged, with only the hum of machinery and the occasional sonar ping to mark the passage of time. Privacy was a luxury they could not afford, and comfort was measured in inches rather than feet. Yet camaraderie thrived in these conditions. Men learned to rely on one another completely, trusting that each crew member would perform their role flawlessly. For the failure of a single individual could jeopardize the entire mission. These submariners were not merely operating machines. They were living inside them, moving with them, thinking with them, and, in many, becoming an inseparable part of the vessel's heartbeat. The primary objective of these underwater operations was to disrupt Japanese supply lines and gather intelligence critical for larger Allied strategies. Every patrol required meticulous planning, from charting the most efficient and least detectable routes to timing attacks that would maximize impact while minimizing exposure. Approaching an enemy convoy demanded patience and nerve, often involving hours of silent tracking while calculating speed, distance, and trajectory. When the moment to strike finally arrived, decisions had to be made instantaneously, whether to fire torpedoes, evade a destroyer, or dive to avoid detection. The success of these attacks had tangible effects on the broader war effort, cutting off essential supplies to enemy forces and gathering intelligence that informed subsequent operations. Yet the human cost and psychological strain were equally significant. Life beneath the waves was not without its rewards. However, the sense of accomplishment from a successful mission was profound, a combination of professional pride and personal exhilaration. The destruction of enemy shipping was more than a tactical victory. It was a demonstration of skill, courage, and teamwork under the most extreme conditions. Sailors shared stories of moments when a well-timed maneuver saved the vessel from depth charges or when the sight of an enemy ship sinking below the surface affirmed the months of preparation and tension. Yet these triumphs were always tempered by the awareness of ever-present danger. The knowledge that a single miscalculation could result in disaster not only for the crew, but for the broader strategic efforts they supported. The psychological and physical demands of submarine duty were immense. Claustrophobia, seasickness, and the constant hum of machinery were daily companions, and the mental strain of maintaining silence, vigilance, and precision for extended periods could be taxing. The men adapted through a mixture of discipline, humor, and small routines, finding ways to maintain morale in the tight confines. They shared meals, played cards, and told stories to keep their minds sharp and spirits lifted, aware that every lapse could have consequences far beyond their immediate surroundings. Even the smallest routines took on extraordinary significance, offering moments of normalcy and reassurance amid the relentless tension of submarine operations. Each mission also relied heavily on coordination with other elements of the Navy. Intelligence gathered by submarines often guided carrier strikes, amphibious assaults, and broader strategic planning, making these vessels indispensable tools in the complex machinery of war. Their actions could create openings for ground troops, protect larger fleets, and disrupt the enemy's logistical networks, demonstrating that even the most covert operations could have a decisive impact on the outcome of campaigns across the vast Pacific theater. The combination of stealth, skill, and endurance turned submarines into force multipliers, capable of influencing the broader trajectory of the war while operating in the shadows far from public attention. The volunteer nature of submarine service speaks to the extraordinary character of these men. They knowingly embraced conditions that were uncomfortable, dangerous, and psychologically taxing. Yet they did so with commitment and pride, driven by a sense of purpose that transcended personal comfort. Letters from home, like those carried by the Navy's mail system, were particularly cherished, offering reassurance and emotional sustenance to men isolated underwater for weeks at a time. Every successful patrol, every torpedo launched, and every intelligence report gathered was intertwined with these human connections, reminding the sailors that despite the silence of the deep, they remained part of a larger community and a cause far greater than themselves. Submarine service in the Pacific was therefore a study in contrasts, danger and reward, isolation and camaraderie, silence and decisive action. It demanded skill, bravery, and resilience on a level few other wartime roles required, and it illustrated vividly the interplay between human ingenuity, technological prowess, and sheer determination. The submariners were the quiet sentinels of the sea, executing dangerous missions that few saw and even fewer understood fully. Yet their contributions were pivotal in shaping the outcome of the war. Through their eyes, we understand that naval warfare in the Pacific was not only about surface battles, bombers, and amphibious assaults, but also about the unseen efforts beneath the waves, where courage, strategy, and endurance converged in ways that forever changed the nature of maritime combat. These men, volunteers in every sense, exemplified the extraordinary human capacity to adapt, endure, and prevail under conditions that tested both mind and body, proving that even in the silent depths, heroism could thrive, and victories could be quietly won. Above the vast stretches of the Pacific, where the horizon seemed infinite and the sun cast glimmers across the restless waters, a different kind of warfare unfolded, one of speed, coordination, and precision. Aircraft carriers, the floating fortresses of modern naval combat, had transformed the dynamics of the Second World War, allowing the U.S. Navy to project air power across thousands of miles and strike at enemy positions with unprecedented reach. Unlike traditional ships, which relied on guns and armor to dominate engagements, carriers carried the air arm of the fleet, planes that could take off and land on their decks, delivering both reconnaissance and devastating firepower. This revolution in naval warfare demanded meticulous planning, seamless teamwork, and a constant awareness of timing, weather, and enemy movements, all of which converged to make the aircraft carrier a linchpin of Allied success in the Pacific theater. Life aboard a carrier was a study in contrasts. It was at once a floating city, bustling with personnel managing everything from flight operations to engine maintenance, and a battlefield in miniature, where every decision could have consequences measured in lives and strategic gains. Pilots, mechanics, signal officers, and deck crews operated with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each aware that the success of a mission depended on the flawless execution of their role. Takeoffs and landings were orchestrated with extraordinary care, as timing was crucial to ensure that waves of aircraft could strike in coordination, overwhelm enemy defenses, and return safely to the deck. The challenge intensified when environmental factors such as wind, rain, or rough seas threatened to disrupt these delicate operations. But ingenuity and rigorous training allowed the crews to adapt quickly, maintaining operational tempo even under adverse conditions. The mechanics of launching aircraft sometimes required ingenuity and innovation beyond what one might expect from traditional naval operations. When wind conditions were insufficient for a safe takeoff, catapults were employed, hurling planes into the air with both speed and precision. Each launch was a moment of tense anticipation, combination of science, engineering, and trust in the pilot's skill and the deck crew's timing. Every plane carried not just bombs or reconnaissance cameras, but also the hopes and strategic intentions of the fleet. And the margin for error was razor thin. The coordination required for these operations was extraordinary, with flight decks and ready rooms functioning like a hive of synchronized activity, where communication, discipline, and timing were paramount. Once airborne, carrier-based pilots executed a variety of missions, from precision strikes on fortified enemy positions to interception of Japanese aircraft and support of amphibious operations on contested islands. Each sortie demanded meticulous preparation. Intelligence reports briefed in the ready room informed pilots of enemy positions, supply catches, and potential hazards, while weather conditions and tactical timing dictated flight paths and attack angles. In these moments, pilots became the embodiment of the fleet's reach and impact, their actions extending the influence of a single carrier across miles of enemy-held territory. The excitement of a successful strike, the exhilaration of evading anti-aircraft fire, and the satisfaction of achieving tactical objectives were tempered by the ever-present risk of loss, as each mission carried with it the possibility of damage, injury, or worse. The synergy between carriers and other fleet elements amplified their impact. Submarines patrolled the waters ahead, gathering intelligence and disrupting enemy logistics, while battleships and cruisers provided supporting fire for landing operations or defended the carriers from surface threats. This orchestration allowed the carriers to operate with relative freedom, projecting air power in ways that reshaped the Pacific campaign. Every decision, from the timing of a strike to the sequencing of landings, was made with a comprehensive understanding of both immediate tactical goals and the broader strategic objectives of the Allied command. This integration of technology, intelligence, and human skill exemplified the new era of naval warfare, where the success of the fleet depended on more than just firepower. It required coordination, foresight, and adaptability. Stories from the flight decks illustrate the human element behind these operations. Pilots often described the adrenaline of the launch, the split-second adjustments required to maintain formation, and the relief of returning safely to the carrier. Deck crews, too, carried the weight of responsibility. Knowing that any misstep could endanger lives and jeopardize the mission, engineers worked tirelessly to maintain planes, ensuring that engines, controls, and weaponry functioned perfectly under the harsh conditions of the open sea. The sense of pride and camaraderie among these men was palpable, as they recognized that their collective efforts enabled the fleet to project power across vast distances, striking fear and disruption into enemy lines while protecting their own forces. Even mundane tasks, such as refueling, arming, and repairing aircraft, became critical components of the campaign. Quick turnaround times ensured that successive waves of planes could be launched, maintaining relentless pressure on enemy positions and sustaining the tempo of operations. Coordination between pilots, mechanics, and intelligence officers became a finely tuned rhythm, each action building upon the last to create cumulative impact far beyond what any single ship could achieve. The ability of carriers to maintain this tempo, combined with their mobility, allowed Allied forces to achieve strategic surprise and maintain initiative in a theater where geography and distance posed constant challenges. The lessons of carrier operations extended beyond the technical and tactical. They highlighted the importance of human ingenuity, teamwork, and the ability to adapt under pressure. Every launch, every strike, and every landing reflected the convergence of preparation, skill, and courage. In a war defined by vast distances, hostile environments, and complex enemy strategies, carriers enabled a projection of power that redefined the possibilities of naval warfare. They were not simply platforms for planes. They were orchestrators of strategy, engines of morale, and instruments of both destruction and hope. Through these operations, we gain insight into the transformative nature of warfare in the Pacific, where technology and human skill converge to produce effects far greater than the sum of their parts. The aircraft carrier, with its pilots, crew, and meticulously coordinated missions, exemplifies the evolution of modern naval combat, demonstrating that victory in the vast expanse of the Pacific relied as much on coordination, innovation, and human determination as it did on sheer firepower. In these floating cities of steel and air, the U.S. Navy not only projected strength but also forged stories of bravery, skill, and resilience that resonate across the history of the Second World War, reminding us that in warfare, the precision of action and the courage of those executing it are inseparable from strategic success. The jungles, mountains, and coastline of New Guinea emerged during World War II as one of the most unforgiving and strategically significant theaters in the Pacific, where control over key points like Milne Bay and Port Moresby could determine the course of the conflict in the Southwest Pacific. For the Allied forces, these locations were more than mere dots on a map, they were lifelines, staging grounds, and symbols of resistance against an advancing Japanese military determined to consolidate its dominance over the region. The struggle for control over these vital areas was not only a contest of firepower and manpower, but also a test of endurance, ingenuity, and the human spirit, as soldiers faced terrain as formidable as the enemy itself. Dense jungles teeming with wildlife, swamps that swallowed supplies, and the jagged ridges of the Owen Stanley Mountains created natural defenses that were as challenging as the disciplined Japanese troops entrenched across the islands, making every advance a story of perseverance and adaptation. The Battle of Milne Bay in late 1942 exemplified the stakes and challenges faced by Allied forces. Situated at the tip of New Guinea, this remote outpost became the target of a determined Japanese amphibious assault aimed at establishing a foothold to facilitate further incursions into the region. The defenders, primarily Australian troops supported by a smaller contingent of Americans, understood that failure could open the door to a cascade of Japanese advances, potentially threatening Port Moresby and the broader Southwest Pacific strategy. Yet the battle was fought not only with rifles and artillery, but also with ingenuity, local knowledge, and coordination across diverse military branches. Allied air power, coordinated from carriers and land bases, played a crucial role, disrupting Japanese supply lines and softening beachheads before ground forces even engaged in combat, demonstrating the interplay between naval strategy and terrestrial defense. Port Moresby, located further along the southern coast, became the focal point for a campaign that combined logistics, intelligence, and sheer human determination. Securing this port was essential for maintaining supply lines, launching offensive operations, and ensuring communication between scattered Allied forces. Yet the approach to Port Moresby was anything but straightforward. The Owen Stanley Mountains stood as a natural barrier, their jagged peaks and narrow passes testing the physical limits of soldiers traversing them. Soldiers often had to cross swamps, climb steep ridges, and navigate dense jungle trails while carrying heavy loads of supplies and equipment. The environment itself was as relentless as the enemy, with rain-soaked terrain making every step a struggle and disease threatening to sap the strength of even the fittest troops. Yet the soldiers adapted, using local knowledge, improvisation, and determination to traverse these obstacles, often aided by native guides who moved through the landscape with remarkable sure-footedness and understanding of the jungle's hidden perils. The Japanese resistance, while formidable, often underestimated the resilience and coordination of Allied forces. At Milne Bay, despite superior numbers and initial tactical advantages, Japanese troops were met with well-coordinated counterattacks, combined arms tactics, and the timely application of air support that blunted their momentum. Similarly, at Port Moresby, the Allied forces leveraged every advantage from intelligence reports gathered by submarines and reconnaissance planes to the rapid deployment of reinforcements by air to counter Japanese maneuvers. These operations demonstrated the critical role of timing, preparation, and adaptability in overcoming both environmental and human challenges, showing that success in the Southwest Pacific depended as much on strategy and coordination as on individual courage and tenacity. Every advance across New Guinea's terrain carried lessons in improvisation and endurance. Allied troops learned to navigate the dense jungle using trail markers and local guides, to ration supplies carefully in a region where resupply was a monumental logistical challenge, and to maintain morale amid relentless conditions. The local villages often became essential allies, offering shelter, food, and assistance to wounded soldiers, helping to maintain the flow of operations and preserving life in circumstances that could otherwise have been fatal. These human connections, whether forged with native inhabitants or between soldiers themselves, reinforced the understanding that warfare in New Guinea was as much about community, resourcefulness, and trust as it was about tactics and firepower. The role of air support in these campaigns cannot be overstated. Carrier-based aircraft and land-based planes provided reconnaissance, struck at enemy positions, and delivered supplies where terrain made traditional transport impossible. Pilots became lifelines, ferrying troops, munitions, and critical intelligence across otherwise impassable areas, and their efforts often determined the success or failure of ground operations. The precision required in these missions, coupled with the coordination between airborne and ground forces, underscored the complexity of warfare in New Guinea, where the environment amplified the challenges posed by the enemy and demanded a multidimensional approach to combat. Throughout the campaigns in Milne Bay, Port Moresby, and surrounding regions, the combination of harsh terrain, determined Japanese resistance, and logistical complexity created a crucible in which strategy, courage, and innovation were tested to the fullest. Every soldier, pilot, and sailor involved in these operations had to adapt continuously, respond to unforeseen challenges, and rely on both training and instinct to survive and succeed. These battles demonstrated that control over key geographic locations was inseparable from human endurance and ingenuity, and that the Southwest Pacific Theater required a holistic approach to warfare in which the environment was as significant a factor as the enemy. In retrospect, the campaigns across New Guinea illustrate the interplay between geography, strategy, and human resilience. The Allied successes at Milne Bay and Port Moresby were not the result of overwhelming force alone, but of the meticulous coordination of air, sea, and ground units, the skillful use of intelligence, and the extraordinary endurance of soldiers navigating one of the most challenging theaters of World War II. Each victory represented not just a tactical achievement but a testament to adaptability, determination, and the ability to harmonize diverse elements of warfare into a cohesive and effective strategy. Ultimately, the battles for Milne Bay and Port Moresby remind us that war is shaped not only by weapons and numbers but also by the environment, human ingenuity, and the will to endure against overwhelming odds. These campaigns underscore how geography can dictate strategy, how coordination can amplify strength, and how resilience in the face of adversity can turn formidable challenges into lasting achievements, leaving lessons that resonate far beyond the Pacific jungles where they were first tested. In the treacherous landscapes of New Guinea, where the dense jungle and jagged mountains conspired to slow every advance, the Allied campaign relied on more than sheer determination and infantry prowess. It depended on the seamless integration of air power with ground operations, a collaboration that became a lifeline for troops scattered across impossible terrain. The Australian U.S. forces quickly recognized that conventional supply lines, reliant on overland transport through swamps, ridges, and narrow trails, were insufficient to sustain their campaigns against a determined and well-entrenched Japanese enemy. Air support emerged as a crucial tool not only for offensive operations but also for maintaining the flow of supplies, evacuating the wounded, and providing reconnaissance that could tip the balance in engagements where terrain often favored the defender. The logistics of air support in New Guinea were nothing short of extraordinary. Troop transports, cargo planes, and bombers were repurposed in innovative ways to ferry food, ammunition, medical supplies, and even construction equipment into remote forward positions that were otherwise inaccessible. Pilots and crew navigated unpredictable weather, mountain-induced turbulence, and the constant threat of enemy fighters to deliver essential supplies with remarkable precision. Each flight represented a carefully coordinated effort, as miscalculations could leave troops stranded, out of ammunition, or without medical care, turning minor setbacks into potentially catastrophic losses. The ingenuity required to solve these challenges was matched only by the courage of the men and women who executed these missions, often flying into combat zones with minimal protection, relying on both skill and luck to reach isolated units deep in the jungle. Beyond the practical necessity of resupply, the psychological impact of air support was profound. Soldiers entrenched in remote positions, surrounded by hostile forces and suffering from exhaustion and disease, found reassurance in the sight of Allied planes overhead, bringing supplies, intelligence, or evacuation assistance. For the men slogging through mud-soaked trails and climbing treacherous passes, a supply drop from above was more than a tactical advantage. It was a symbol of connection to the broader campaign and a tangible reminder that they were not alone in their struggle. The arrival of food, ammunition, or a medical team could lift morale, sustain effort, and allow units to maintain pressure on the enemy, illustrating the interdependence of air and ground operations in this complex theater. Evacuating casualties in such an environment required a combination of precision, speed, and improvisation. Air ambulances became indispensable, ferrying the wounded from forward positions to makeshift field hospitals or more permanent medical facilities at secure bases. Pilots had to locate small clearings or improvised airstrips, often marked hastily by ground forces, and execute landings and takeoffs with little margin for error. Each successful evacuation saved lives and preserved the fighting capacity of units, reinforcing the essential nature of air-ground coordination. Local villagers and soldiers frequently assisted in guiding aircraft, carrying wounded from the jungle to pickup points, and helping organize supplies, highlighting the collaborative effort required to overcome the natural and tactical challenges of New Guinea. The coordination of troop movements with air support further exemplified the sophistication of Allied operations. In many cases, ground forces could not traverse long distances through the dense jungle quickly enough to respond to changing battle conditions, making airborne troop insertions a strategic necessity. Paratroopers, for example, were deployed to positions that allowed the Allied forces to bypass heavily defended areas or to reinforce critical fronts rapidly. Each insertion demanded careful timing. With aircraft, ground observers, and local guides working in concert to ensure that troops landed safely and at optimal locations to engage the enemy. The precision required in these operations underscored the reliance on communication, intelligence, and rigorous planning, as any misalignment could lead to troops being scattered, supplies lost, or missions compromised. Air support also played a decisive role in disrupting Japanese supply lines, softening enemy positions ahead of ground assaults, and providing ongoing reconnaissance that allowed Allied commanders to adapt strategies in real time. Pilots flew over enemy territory to locate troop concentrations, supply depots, and fortifications, transmitting vital intelligence that informed both immediate tactical decisions and longer-term operational planning. This continuous feedback loop between air and ground forces enabled the Allies to operate with a level of situational awareness that compensated for the challenges posed by New Guinea's hostile environment, turning the landscape from an obstacle into a coordinated battlefield where mobility, adaptability, and timing dictated success. Stories from the field illustrate the human dimension of this interdependence. Soldiers often recalled the relief when supply drops arrived just as rations were dwindling, or when air support successfully fended off an enemy advance. Pilots remembered the tension of flying low over dense jungle, navigating unseen obstacles, and delivering critical supplies while under fire. Medical teams, dependent on aerial evacuation, could save lives that would otherwise have been lost to infection or exhaustion. These interconnected roles highlighted the fact that victory in New Guinea was not the product of any single branch of the military, but of a meticulously orchestrated effort, where each component, air, land, and human determination reinforced the others. The lessons from these operations extend beyond logistics and tactics. They demonstrate the transformative power of coordination and innovation in overcoming environmental and strategic challenges. The ability of air support to sustain, reinforce, and amplify the effectiveness of ground forces exemplified a modern approach to warfare, where technological capability, planning, and human skill converged to achieve objectives that would have been impossible through traditional methods alone. Ultimately, the success of Allied forces in New Guinea owed as much to the ingenuity, courage, and precise coordination of air and ground units as it did to the individual valor of soldiers facing enemy fire and harsh conditions. Each supply drop, casualty evacuation, and airborne insertion represented a triumph of strategy and collaboration, ensuring that despite the formidable Japanese resistance and unforgiving terrain, the Allied campaign advanced steadily, Through this lens, the story of New Guinea becomes not merely a tale of battles won, but a testament to the power of coordination, resilience, and the ability to leverage every available asset in pursuit of victory. As the Allied campaign in the Southwest Pacific progressed, it became clear that overcoming Japanese defenses required more than incremental advances through dense jungle trails or slow-moving overland assaults. It demanded bold, large-scale amphibious operations and the innovative use of airborne forces to seize strategic points before the enemy could fully respond. These operations, a blend of meticulous planning, precise coordination, and sheer audacity, were designed to exploit vulnerabilities in Japanese positions while minimizing the attrition that protracted jungle fighting often imposed. From the planning rooms of command centers to the sun-scorched beaches and misty mountain clearings, every element of the operation had to be synchronized, as even minor delays or miscalculations could transform an opportunity into disaster. The story of these landings and jumps is one of courage, ingenuity, and the relentless drive to turn strategic objectives into tangible victories. Amphibious landings, the backbone of Allied strategy in New Guinea, required coordination on a scale few theaters had demanded before. Landing craft, transports, and support vessels had to navigate coral reefs, shifting tides, and enemy artillery while delivering thousands of troops, vehicles, and supplies onto hostile beaches. Soldiers often faced the challenge of disembarking under fire, moving through water that could conceal obstacles, and immediately establishing defensive positions to repel counterattacks. The stakes were immense, as control of these initial beachheads dictated the ability of subsequent waves to reinforce, resupply, and expand the foothold inland. Planners had to consider not only tides, wind, and terrain but also enemy patrols, air reconnaissance, and the potential for ambushes, transforming each landing into a carefully choreographed operation where timing, communication, and initiative could make the difference between success and catastrophe. Complementing these landings, paratrooper deployments became an invaluable tool for shaping the battlefield. Dropping troops behind enemy lines allowed the Allies to seize key terrain features, disrupt communications, and create confusion within Japanese ranks. In New Guinea, where mountain ridges, rivers, and jungle expanses often limited conventional maneuvering, paratroopers could bypass these natural obstacles and arrive at locations that would otherwise take days to reach overland. Each jump was fraught with risk. Pilots navigated turbulent winds and dense cloud cover. Troops had to execute precise exits from aircraft, and landing zones were often partially obscured or contested. Yet, when executed successfully, these airborne operations provided immediate tactical advantages, allowing Allied forces to establish strongpoints, secure supply routes, and facilitate follow-on operations that built momentum across the campaign. The coordination between amphibious forces and airborne units required rigorous planning and a deep understanding of timing and logistics. Landing craft and air transport had to arrive in sequence to ensure that troops were reinforced, that artillery and supplies were ready to support the next wave, and that casualties could be evacuated without compromising the operation. Communication between naval commanders, ground officers, and airborne coordinators was essential, often relying on signals, runners, or improvised methods when conventional radio contact was impossible. These layers of coordination exemplified the complexity of modern warfare, demonstrating that success depended not only on individual bravery, but also on the seamless integration of multiple forces operating under high stress and unpredictable conditions. One striking example of this approach occurred during operations along the northern coast of New Guinea, where Allied planners identified the need to neutralize fortified Japanese positions threatening Port Moresby and critical supply lines. Amphibious landings brought in waves of infantry and engineers, who quickly established beachheads under heavy enemy fire. Simultaneously, paratroopers descended behind the lines, capturing key ridges and choke points that prevented Japanese reinforcements from reaching the front. The combination of frontal assault and rear interdiction created a pincer effect, forcing the defenders to divide their attention and resources, which amplified the effectiveness of the Allied offensive. Each success, measured in secured terrain and weakened enemy positions, highlighted the interdependence of air, sea, and ground operations, illustrating the necessity of holistic strategic thinking in complex environments. Beyond the immediate tactical benefits, these operations had a profound psychological impact on both Allied troops and Japanese defenders. For Allied soldiers, witnessing the precision and coordination of amphibious landings and airborne insertions reinforced confidence in their leadership and in the broader campaign strategy. Soldiers on the ground could see reinforcements arriving in dramatic fashion, with the knowledge that their efforts were part of a carefully orchestrated plan that maximized their chances of success. For the Japanese, sudden incursions behind front lines, coupled with persistent pressure from frontal assaults, created uncertainty, stress, and a sense of inevitability that could erode morale and cohesion. This psychological dimension, often overlooked in traditional accounts, was crucial in a theater where terrain favored the defender and prolonged engagements could sap energy and resolve. The human stories that emerged from these operations illustrate the extraordinary bravery and adaptability required to execute such complex maneuvers. Soldiers waded through surf under fire, improvised defensive positions in unfamiliar terrain, and relied on their training and instincts to survive their first moments on the beach. Paratroopers, often landing off target due to wind or miscalculations, had to regroup quickly, navigate unfamiliar jungles, and coordinate with ground units while under threat of enemy engagement. Pilots, ship crews, and support personnel played equally vital roles, ensuring that supplies, reinforcements, and intelligence flowed seamlessly to sustain the operation. Every individual's actions, when combined, created the momentum necessary to break through Japanese defensive lines and secure strategic objectives critical to the overall campaign. Amphibious and airborne operations in New Guinea also underscored the importance of adaptability in modern warfare. Planners and commanders continuously refined techniques, learning from each engagement to improve timing, landing procedures, and coordination between units. This iterative approach allowed the Allies to overcome the challenges of weather, terrain, and enemy resistance with increasing efficiency, gradually turning New Guinea from a forbidding wilderness into a theater where coordinated, decisive action could achieve tangible strategic results. Ultimately, these operations highlight the transformative impact of combined arms strategy, where success depended on synchronizing multiple elements of military power: naval, aerial, and ground into cohesive campaigns. By integrating large-scale amphibious landings with airborne assaults, the Allies not only seized key positions and weakened Japanese defenses, but also demonstrated the power of innovation, coordination, and adaptability in the face of complex and unforgiving conditions. The story of New Guinea's beaches and ridges stands as a testament to the extraordinary planning, execution, and human courage that made these operations a cornerstone of Allied success in the Southwest Pacific. As the campaign in New Guinea drew to a close, the story of victory was not merely one of guns, planes, or ships, but of the remarkable collaboration between American, Australian, and local New Guinean forces, whose combined efforts turned the tide against a determined and resourceful enemy. From the jagged peaks of the Owen Stanley Mountains to the swamps and river valleys that crisscrossed the island, these men and women demonstrated extraordinary adaptability, teamwork, and courage, often under conditions that tested both body and spirit to the limits. The jungle was not only a physical obstacle, but a psychological one. With heat, disease, and isolation compounding the inherent dangers of combat, yet every challenge was met with resourcefulness, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to the mission. The American and Australian troops brought discipline, training, and strategic vision to the campaign. But it was the intimate knowledge of the terrain and the unwavering support of local New Guinean communities that often made the difference between success and failure. Villagers guided troops along hidden trails, transported wounded soldiers to safety, and even helped distribute supplies dropped from the air. Their contribution, though often overlooked in broader histories, was crucial. They served as guides, carriers, and allies, bridging the gap between the difficult landscape and the operational needs of the Allies. Without this local expertise, many of the audacious maneuvers, airborne insertions, amphibious landings, and rapid redeployments might have faltered or incurred far heavier casualties. Adaptability became a defining characteristic of the campaign. Soldiers had to learn to navigate terrain that changed from swamp to cliffside in a matter of hours, improvising solutions to river crossings, steep ridges, and dense undergrowth. Air support had to adjust to unpredictable weather and shifting tactical priorities, while naval forces needed to coordinate complex amphibious landings with precise timing to ensure that every troop, vehicle, and supply drop arrived exactly when and where it was required. Even within the ranks, individuals had to adapt to unforeseen challenges, engineers clearing paths through jungle, medics treating the sick and wounded in makeshift facilities, and communications officers ensuring that information flowed across the chaotic network of ground, air, and sea operations. Each moment demanded ingenuity, courage, and the ability to work seamlessly as part of a larger team. Teamwork extended beyond national or service lines. Allied success depended on the integration of multiple forces, each with its own capabilities and limitations. American paratroopers, Australian infantry, naval gunfire support, and local porters had to operate in unison, understanding not only their own objectives, but also the timing and needs of other units. The rhythm of the campaign was dictated by coordination. A paratrooper jump had to precede the main assault by mere hours. Supply drops had to arrive in sync with frontline demands, and reconnaissance reports had to be immediately communicated to adjust tactics in real time. This complex dance of strategy and execution required trust, communication, and a shared commitment to the mission, exemplifying the essence of teamwork in a theater where even minor missteps could prove fatal. Human courage remained at the heart of every action. The men and women who fought in New Guinea faced not only an entrenched enemy but the relentless challenges of disease, exhaustion, and environmental hazards. Soldiers waded through crocodile-infested rivers, climbed muddy slopes under constant threat of ambush, and endured weeks without respite from the jungle's oppressive humidity and heat. Pilots flew low over enemy positions to deliver supplies or conduct reconnaissance, often knowing that a single mistake could mean death. Medics and stretcher-bearers moved fearlessly into combat zones to retrieve the wounded, while local guides and carriers risked their lives to ensure the success of operations. Each act of bravery, whether grand or understated, contributed to the overall effort, creating a collective courage that transformed individual risk into operational advantage. The campaign also taught profound lessons about the power of unity and cultural collaboration. Despite differences in language, training, and experience, the convergence of American, Australian, and New Guinean forces created a synergy that amplified their effectiveness far beyond what any single group could achieve alone. respect for local knowledge, adaptability to evolving conditions, and a commitment to shared goals became as critical to victory as firepower or logistics. This holistic approach to warfare, combining strategic planning with human ingenuity and collaboration, allowed the Allies to overcome formidable Japanese defenses, secure key strategic points, and lay the groundwork for subsequent advances in the Pacific theater. Looking back, the story of New Guinea is a testament to the enduring principles that define successful military campaigns: adaptability in the face of unforeseen challenges, teamwork across diverse groups, and the courage to confront danger with unwavering resolve. The victories achieved were not the result of a single factor, but the product of coordinated action, informed planning, and the dedication of countless individuals working toward a common purpose. Every amphibious landing, every airborne insertion, and every supply drop reflected this intricate interplay of strategy and human effort, demonstrating that in warfare, as in luck, success rarely comes from isolated actions but from the sustained, collective endeavor of many. As we reflect on these events, it becomes clear that the story of New Guinea is more than a military campaign. It is a narrative about human resilience, cooperation, and the capacity to overcome obstacles through courage, ingenuity, and unity. It reminds us that even in the most challenging environments, people can achieve extraordinary feats when they combine their strengths, trust one another, and adapt to the circumstances they face. The lessons of New Guinea resonate far beyond the battlefield, offering insights into leadership, collaboration, and the enduring human spirit. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into the campaign in New Guinea. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more historical journeys like this, please do not forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you can stay updated with all our future content. Your support helps us bring these stories to life and share them with history enthusiasts around the world. Sleep well, everyone, and let the courage and determination of those who fought in New Guinea inspire your dreams tonight.